From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Rhea Story. Rhea shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode on personal growth and development. I love to call this this subject or this topic kind of a what's your game plan, or what's your strategy for developing yourself. You know, it's football season, and you know we often talk about this in sports that the coach or the coaches come into the game with a game plan. You know, they've studied the strategies and they've studied the opponent that they're getting ready to play, and they've kind of created a game plan um, for the game, and hopefully that they can play out the game the way they expect. And hopefully if they prepared in the right way and the right ways to develop their team and their players, as well as developing their strategy, then they're able to be successful in the game. Now, you and I know that not every team is successful every time. Of course, there's a winner and a loser. But I like the analogy. If we use the same analogy but apply it to our individual lives, each one of us has an opportunity. Every day is like playing a game in the world of sports. And the problem is that, when you wake up today, it's too late to prepare for today. You need to be preparing today for tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So you have to prepare now to be successful in the future. If you wait to prepare until the game time comes, then you're not going to be successful. So I think it's John Maxwell who said, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And I think every one of us can see this at different times in our lives if we look back and go, wow, that was an opportunity. And either I was prepared for it or I wasn't. But a lot of times the outcome is determined by our preparation. And then we can look forward and go, what opportunities are we going to have in the future? And how can I, even more important is the question of how can I be intentional about preparing myself now for those game time opportunities in the future? So, I talk about this in a lot of my blogs and a lot of my books. Personal development is one of the things I'm passionate about because it helps us be more successful, both personally and professionally. The same principles on personal growth apply and help us be successful at home with our families, with our kids, with our spouses. They also help us be more successful in the professional world with our coworkers, with our boss. But they help us in the community with our relationships, with the people you are friends with, or the people you go to church with. And yet, a lot of us kind of let those intentional development opportunities fall by the wayside. And it's easy to do, especially when you're working, and after you get done working you're tired and then you want to spend the weekends just relaxing. And so it's very easy to get in kind of the habit of drifting, of really just not being intentional. But what we find is that if we're not intentionally developing ourselves a little bit on a regular, consistent basis, we're almost guaranteeing ourselves that we will be in exactly the same spot in a year from now or 10 years from now. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you are perfectly and 100% content and completely satisfied with where you are, then it's okay to coast. But I know that since you're listening to podcasts like this one, you have something inside you that says, hey, I want to have more in life. I want to enjoy more in life. I want to do more. I want to be more in life. And there's nothing wrong with that either. We choose what's most important to us, and then we simply have the opportunity to wake up every day and prepare for the future opportunities based on what's most important for us. So, but the thing is that we're never able to maximize our potential if we're not willing to invest the time to develop ourselves. Now, you don't have to do it all day. I know life is busy and life is full. Believe me, as a self-employed entrepreneur, I know there are endless projects and opportunities and tasks and to-do lists and demands and 100 and something emails and phone calls. And the challenge is finding those opportunities to invest in yourself kind of in between all of the things that you must do and the things that are pressing. Now, to me, I like to look at this from a weekly perspective, but if it works better for you to do it daily, then by all means, do it daily. Um, but I like to plan out my week at a time and say, here's an opportunity for me to work on my personal growth. Now, part of my personal growth plan is to read 50 either personal growth or nonfiction leadership books a year. So one a week on average. I like to read one book a week on average of nonfiction or personal growth, leadership, development, something like that. Because here's why. It's not just what I read about, but it's also how they shape my thinking. I have new thoughts when I develop myself, new perspectives, new insights, and it changes the way I think. Now, the reason that's important is changing the way we think changes how we feel and what we do, and that changes the results that we get in life. Now, I guarantee you can, every single one of you listening to this podcast can think back to when you were just graduating high school. And I don't care if that's been 10 years or 2 years or 20 years since you graduated high school, you think differently than you did on the day you graduated high school. You have different values now. Maybe you've gotten a little older. Maybe you have kids yourself now. But for whatever reason, you've grown at least some since then, and maybe a lot, depending on how intentional you've been over the years. And because you think differently than you did in those teenage years, you do things differently, you live your life differently, and you're getting different results. And so it's easy to look back at those years and think, wow, I didn't know what I didn't know when I was 17 or 18. And then it's just simply a matter of looking forward and going, wow, what else should I know or could I know right now that I don't? And how can I change that so that in 10 years I'm thinking at a different level even yet again? So, and again, it doesn't necessarily have to be reading a book. If reading's not your thing, maybe listening to some audio, listening to some podcasts, watching some TEDx talks. The thing is, there are so many resources out there today that are low or no cost. It doesn't have to mean buying a book. Now, I love books. I love books. I probably spend more money on buying books on Amazon than I do on just about anything else. But that's one way that I can ensure my personal growth. So part of my personal growth plan, I read a book a week. And I'll tell you, I have probably 20 something books already sitting on my shelf, just waiting for me to get to them. And I've got a wish list on Amazon of probably another 30. And then I've got a bunch more listed on my phone of books I want to read. And I love to read them because, again, I'm looking for those good quotes or those thought-provoking insights that really help me raise my level of thinking, my awareness relative to what's going on in the world, what's going on inside my head, what's going on in terms of influencing other people. Because I know there's stuff out there I don't know, and I want to be intentional about mining for those golden nuggets that will help me be more successful in every dimension of life. And so, almost everything that I read, I'm able to get a nugget from it. I'm able to learn something, or maybe just get a really good quote. I just finished recently reading. I was reading "Touch the Top of the World" by Eric Weihenmayer, and I shared a little bit of his story on a previous podcast. But I get a really good couple of quotes out of the book. And, that's one of the things I love is to just capture quotes and jot them down, because there again, it gives us something to think about. Um, And one of the probably the first quote in the book that I highlighted and flagged, and I just wanted to share it with you because I thought it was just impactful. And it was almost unexpected because I'm reading the story, and I'm reading the story of he talks about in his childhood about growing up and then starting to go blind, and um, that was a pretty traumatic experience in and of itself. But he goes on to graduate college and then start a job teaching, and then going on to do so many other things. And then he goes on to start climbing mountains and climbing to the top of Mount Everest. And that's someone we can learn from, because it speaks volumes in terms of overcoming obstacles and not arguing for our limitations. And I think we all have the opportunity to do that. We can argue for our opportunities, or we can argue for our limitations. But anyway, one of the greatest quotes that I found in the book, and I'll share it with you. He says he learned an important lesson, that people's perceptions of our limitations are more damaging than those limitations themselves. And it was the hardest lesson I had to swallow. And he shares that after it was a lesson that he learned after just trying over and over and over again to apply for jobs, and no one would hire him because of his blindness. And they were either afraid he couldn't do it, or they were afraid he would be a liability, or he might get injured, or so he tried over and over and over the whole year to get a job, and just couldn't find someone to hire him. And it's true that other people's perceptions of our limitations could be more damaging than those limitations. But I would add to that and say our perception of our limitations could be more damaging than those limitations, because they hold us back. And it's just one of the reasons I love to read, because or develop myself, whether it's reading or audios, or again, so many ways. Because when I stopped and I read his quote about other people's perceptions could be more damaging than limitations themselves, it made me think that is true. But it's also true that our perception of our limitations is probably more damaging than the limitations themselves. Because what we believe determines how we behave. So again, just a real nugget example of how developing ourselves can increase our awareness relative to the world that we live in and relative to the world inside our head. And emotional intelligence and self-awareness is one of the most powerful tools in helping us maximize our potential. Just being more aware, just gaining some knowledge and gaining some insight. So, all right, my friends, until next time, be intentional about developing yourself. Take care.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.